chapter 13 was about diversity, and so for the first question, it is to explain the concept of diversity and the impact that it has on the workplace. So basically, diversity is sort of like how we differ as people. There are many ways that we can differ. Obviously, the big ways, there are visible ways, such as like skin color, ethnic background, stuff like that. But diversity in the workplace is basically the practice or the sort of quality of including people from those different backgrounds, ethnicities, and stuff like that into like a company, and being able to work together regardless of the differences between us. Basically, how it impacts the workplace is that the biggest thing is that it provides like a different perspective. This is because, if you have someone from the same background, the same sort of country sort of thing, what this does is it just creates like a one-way sort of really narrow perspective on sort of your business and how to do things and how to run things. Whereas if you were able to have diversity, whether that be through different countries, different races, religions, genders, whatever it may be, there's so many different ways that we can be diverse. We're able to get a better perspective, and we're able to actually maximize the potential of the company. If you have just sort of like a one-way sort of way of thinking, then you can really there's like a huge chunk of people in the world that you can't even like market to or like appeal to, because you have nothing like to be able to like represent them, sort of thing. So you're able to represent and be able to appeal to more people, so it actually will affect your company, your workplace very well, if you do it properly. The other thing is that it can create a lot better relationships between your workers, which can create better productivity. That's a big thing too, because sometimes differences are what bring us together, and we're actually able to like learn and benefit and build off of each other, rather than it just being the same thing. And it's fun to learn about other people's stories and backgrounds and stuff like that, so it can create a stronger culture in the workplace. What are some of the common elements that impact our personal views? This one's big because there are a lot of ways that personal bias and sort of stuff like that can get in the way of like diversity and like being able to excel in the workplace. You have your unconscious bias, which is basically sort of attitudes and like feelings that we've like developed based off of like stereotypes and things like that. So it's one of those things, it's not necessarily like, it's like in the back of our heads, like we don't actually fully know. The knowledge isn't there. If we were truly knowledgeable, then unconscious bias wouldn't get in the way. It's the stereotypes that kind of like block us from understanding and like realizing that diversity is like a good thing. Then you have prejudice. Basically, prejudice comes down to just thinking that someone else is less than you based off of their differences. That's, a lot of the time we see that. I think I see it a lot in politics. But discrimination, stereotyping, same thing. Then we have ethnocentrism. Basically, it's like believing that your own culture is superior. So sort of like the same kind of concept, but like an opposite perspective as prejudice. So instead of thinking that someone else is less than you, you're thinking that you're more than someone else, and that's a problem too, because it kind of goes hand in hand with prejudice. Basically, the best way to mitigate each one of these things would be a really common one would be to sort of group work, sort of team building, team bonding type thing, because then you actually get to know people based on like a personal level rather than for what they may seem, which it shouldn't be like that, but for some people it is. So it gives people the opportunity to actually realize that, just because they're a little different, maybe on the outside or the way they talk or like something like that, it doesn't mean that they're any less or that you're any more. So that's something that's very good team building for that stuff. Another thing would be sort of programs that are in place, sort of that like through part of your training, like how diversity is good because it can inform you about the actual effects that diversity has and the really good things that come along with it. A lot of times people don't know that coming into a job, so if you're able to like incorporate that in your training, sort of into like a program and stuff like that, then you're able to inform people, and that can help sort of minimize sort of personal bias and stuff like that. So how we as managers address diversity along with inclusion? Explain how and why these concepts can influence and shape an organization's culture. So basically, sort of like what I was talking about before, when you have, when you guys value diversity and inclusion, what happens is that the culture is a lot more like up, like it's like happier, people get along better, production goes up, there's less of that like toxic sort of culture where people like kind of butt heads all the time and think differently and stuff like that, which as a result, you don't want anybody to have to deal with that. But for your business, that's not a good thing. You don't want a toxic culture. You don't want sort of anything that will affect your profits. So you want to try to create the best culture that you can. Sort of that's where kind of a manager comes into play. You have to like address that from the very start, and make sure you're hiring the right people along the way too, because you want to create the best culture that you can, because it's really going to affect your business, and it's going to affect mental health of people as well. So that's one of the big things when it comes down to shaping a culture in your organization. You don't want that sort of those sort of biases that get in the way and create that toxic culture. So as a manager, we have to do our best to promote and support inclusion within our business.